Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
Comedy should be loud, not necessarily in your face, but it should be there to be seen and enjoyed, really.
Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Drew Sinclair. Drew, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Drew Sinclair. I'm from the UK. I'm an actor. I'm based in Sheffield. And I've recently been back to university, studied performing arts and acting. And in the last couple of years, I've been a part of a couple of things on TV, crime documentaries, and also part of a feature film called The Lock-In. So, that's me.
Very cool. Very cool. A lot of interesting details. Well, Drew, you ready to get started?
I am, yes.
Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comments section. You say things like, I didn't know I didn't subscribe. And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build. And we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me. All right, so the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So, Drew, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
Yes, I agree with that statement. A person, like many comics on the stage, they're either, in my view, like there's two versions. So there's the sort of archetypes who play different characters and portray different people, and then you have the sort of the natural comedians are heightened sort of representations of themselves.
Okay, so you're saying that the comics are the ones that potentially play other characters.
Yes, yeah.
And the comedian is potentially playing a different version of himself?
A different version, but for instance, say comedians like Ricky Gervais or Lee Evans, their craft, and when you watch their shows, they are more or less versions of themselves, often heightened versions of themselves, but what you see on stage is a version of them. As where if you look at sort of, I don't know, Jim Carrey, who's done many sort of films and stuff like that, portrayed different characters, mainly comedic. He has done a few serious films, but he himself even says, the character Jim Carrey is somebody who created that people liked, and therefore he enhanced himself into that character and he was playing that role.
Yeah, so, but he doesn't, has he done stand-up, Jim Carrey? I don't recall.
Jim Carrey, yes. He came from stand-up. He was doing stand-up way back in the day, a long, long time ago. So when the likes of, I can't remember the other comedian, Dan Aykroyd, he started out in stand-up, Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, we're going back a long, long way. There's some videos online of Jim Carrey when he was starting out and he was doing impressions of people on stage, and there were impressions of Clint Eastwood and stuff like that, and what he can do with his face and mold his face into the different sort of ways that he can portray those characters. But he started out on stage, Jim Carrey.
All right. Now I'm recalling. I remember seeing some interesting versions. So, all right. So you ready for the first question, Drew?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. So it's about the role of persona in comedy. So how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self?
Um, I think again, it depends on which of those types I've just been talking about the comedian is. Um, for instance, Rowan Atkinson. Obviously, when he portrays the character Mr. Bean, he doesn't really have a voice, and it's all and it's more in the sort of the actions and the very physical comedy. Um, but that is obviously a character that he's portraying. When you see him in an interview, that's not who Rowan Atkinson is. You know, he's well spoken, and then things that he's done, sort of Blackadder, and things like that. They are all characters, so they're heightened versions. That he's playing roles. As well, if you look at Lee Evans, when he was in his sort of heyday back in the early 2000s and selling out tours worldwide, when you saw him off camera in interviews, he was the same person. You know, he was this fidgety guy, very animated. So yeah, I think both can happen and occur.
Okay. So then does authenticity matter or is illusion part of the magic?
I think in the aspect of like Ricky Gervais and Lee Evans, authenticity of them portraying like Ricky Gervais portrays what everybody sometimes is thinking but doesn't really want to say. You know, and then you've got Lee Evans who's just observing the comedy in his own life and acting upon that in situations that have occurred to him. So I think it is like a heightened um, sort of persona. But a lot of comedy can be put on. There are a lot of actors that do, like, say, for Jim Carrey, it was a character. Jim Carrey was the character, and he always says that Jim Carrey was my alter ego and stuff like that. So it's a bit of both, I believe.
Is that perhaps the best way to go? Is that you create your alter ego, and then your alter ego is actually performing a different character?
I think for some people, it's especially actors. I mean, for me, everybody who's in the sort of comedy aspect and doing stand up and stuff. I tried stand up when I was at university. It was one of our modules, and I had to like study different people and the way that they were sort of hitting the punchlines and what they were talking about. And I found it very difficult because I was trying to sort of watch what they were doing and emulate that in a way instead of being myself. I think if I'd have looked at the module now in the here and now and done it now, I'd have done it differently. I'd have just been me in my natural self. So yeah,
Yeah, there's definitely there's a sense that you have to do something. Like, what am I doing, right? But at the same time, you're actually doing less, obviously, right? You want to try and do less
yeah,
to
yeah.
be authentic. But there's like 25 different things you need to do on stage, and if you don't even know what they are, how can you do less of those, right? So you're like, I got to do this or this, or the thing I'm missing, I don't even know. All right, how about punching up versus punching down? So where do comics versus comedians subscribe to this? Let me put it in some historical context. Did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
Wow. Um, well, no, not really, because in the action of doing that, he doesn't suddenly become the comedic aspect of that situation. Um, I think punching up is like, do you mean like as in punching up as in going some places that people don't necessarily want to go and talking about topics that people don't necessarily want to talk about?
Well, someone else has made another guest has made kind of stated that Ricky Gervais is punching up to God, right? He's actually talking smack, but saying he doesn't believe in God, but God technically is above him, all of us by definition. So that
Yeah,
would be an example of punching up, even though he's doing it in a kind of derogatory way. So does that help clarify?
yeah. I mean, it helps. Again, it depends on the demographic of where you are in the world, I suppose, and
Right.
the culture and the background of and the audience that you're talking to. You have to be aware of your audience and who you're aiming it at. Punching up and like aiming stuff at God and things like that's a very sketchy thing. Um, but he does it in a way that's kind of, you know, it's almost like throwaway comments sometimes when you watch him. Um, Punching down, how do you mean like when you're punching down? So like give an
Well,
example of
great. I think the best example is someone who who would say that they're definitely doing that is Dave Chappelle and punching down on the trans community, right? He's actually re-identified his genre of punching down because of that. So I think that's probably the most common example.
yeah, so as in the way of like taking the mickey out of sort of everyday situations and actual things that happen, that kind of punching down.
Um, I don't know the term taking the Mickey out of it, but that's definitely sounds like a very, very British. Can you define? I mean, I know what you mean, but I'm just curious the way you say it.
Taking the mickey, it's making a joke of something that is
Sounds like a phrase you use, but you don't know where it
it's
came
like,
from.
yeah, you're taking the mickey, you know, you're making a joke
Who's
of the
Mickey? Who's
situation.
Mickey? Which Mickey?
Who knows?
Okay, it's like six,
Who
seven.
knows? Yeah, it was just one of those
Okay.
phrases. But I mean, punching down, I assume if I understand it in this way, is like you're punching down to sort of things that are the common man, as it were. You know, people. You've got this comic who's on stage and he's of a certain status, and then you're punching down to the everyday person and taking the fun out of them and their situation. Now, I think
So
like
Mickey is the everyday person.
yeah, Mickey is the everyday. You're taking the Mickey out of the everyday person, but also it's the sort of I don't know. What's the word?
I think it's so. I mean, I'll throw the idea of cultural appropriation, right? So by punching down, Dave Chappelle is almost superseding the trans community, like saying that well he's better than them, right? Because he's punching down,
Oh,
obviously that
absolutely.
by
Yeah,
definition. But the act is itself is an appropriation of a culture.
absolutely. And I think what I was trying to say is that I think we've sometimes in society and in the world we've forgotten how to be able to laugh at ourselves, enable us to laugh at a joke that maybe is a situation that we've been in or where we are, and that often sometimes leads to comedians being very carefully if you look over the last sort of decade what things are acceptable to be said on stage and what's not. Not that it's a cancel culture, but they have to be very aware of that.
All right. So then how about cultural translation of comedy? So how do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
Well, see, this is funny. I was watching a film the other day with John Candy in it, and it was called Armed and Dangerous. Now, obviously, it's not stand-up comedy, but in that, I watched it through, and he plays a security guard. Well, he's a policeman first, and then gets demoted for something that he didn't do. And ends up being a security guard with a gun. And there's a part of the film where he's dressed up. He's dressed up in a sort of a dress. He's portraying a woman, and he's fully blacked up, and he's got this Caribbean accent going on and what have you like that. Now, that was a long time ago. And I don't know whether people looked at John Candy and knew he was a funny guy. They'd seen lots of films that he'd been in, and I'm sure John Candy back in the day had done stand up at some point. He must have done. But because it was John Candy, it's like they were more accepting of, oh yeah, it's John just being himself or whatever like that. But you can also understand if that was shown in a different part of the world that it might bomb and be like, that's not acceptable.
Well, it would most likely bomb just in time, right? Today we're this is the evolution, and we just look at things differently. So, speaking of bombing, so how does the silence when your joke doesn't land hurt? Physically, emotionally, morally, or spiritually?
It's definitely emotionally. I don't think so much spiritually, but it's definitely a hard feeling. Like when I was doing that stand up for my university course, and I was up on that stage, and some of the things I was doing, some of the jokes landed fairly well. But then there's others you think, this is going to get a laugh from this, and there's just nothing. And it's so soul destroying. And that's
Absolutely. Now,
why
soul destroying, is that emotional or spiritual?
I think it's probably spiritual. It destroys your soul. It takes a little bit away from you, I think, and it stops your belief in that what you're doing or trying to do, that you can do that. I know that at that point when I did that sort of stand up at university, I decided that I couldn't do stand up. I could be an actor, I can be a singer, I can do comedy, I can act comedy, I can portray a character, but stand up, I was like, I'll leave that to the people who know how to do it.
I kind of look at stand up like coding. I don't know. Now we can vibe code, but if you ever try coding anything, it's if anything is wrong, if a typo or doesn't and it won't compile, it doesn't work, right? To me,
Yeah,
it's like that. Like you did all this work and it just enter and no, it doesn't want to do it, right? And so you have to be like perfect for this. But once you got it, it's reproducible and you can just keep going with it. And that's
yeah.
kind of how I see it. So you gotta kind of get it
I think
perfected.
that
So
you're right in the way, like Ricky Gervais when he started out. I think he did the same as what I did, or he'd looked at other comics and was trying to emulate them. Because I've seen Ricky Gervais in some of his earlier years before he kind of found himself by just being himself, and he was bombing. He didn't know what to do. He didn't understand why it wasn't working, and then he was trying bit by bit. I think there was a bit of a documentary I watched him, and he just said, "I when you start being me, just doing things and talk about why my opinions and stuff like that." And obviously that started to work, and it clicked with people.
yeah, it's a crazy thing. You have to go through this roller coaster to get to that point. So, all right, how about love and justice? So, is the highest function of comedy to expose injustice or to make people feel less alone while living with it?
I think it's to make people feel less alone while living with it. I think you can't use it as a platform for injustice. There are a lot of comedians that maybe do that or try to do it. How successful they are, I don't know. But I think the the point of a comedian is to make you laugh, have fun. From the moment they step out on the stage, you're all already smiling. So yeah, to be comfortable with what they're saying and to make you feel love for that character or whatever they're doing on stage. I think that's the main thing.
All right. So, very important question, advertising and self promotion. So, who advertises themselves more, the comic, the comedian, or the magician?
I think the comic tends to advertise them more because they need to be. The comic needs to have that platform and for people to buy into their kind of comedy. There's where the comic, who's somebody who's naturally funny, doesn't need to do that as much, doesn't need to promote themselves, because what they are is, being who they are, is what will sell them. And the magician, not too sure about the magician.
So is self-promotion necessary, or is it seen as selling out?
I think sometimes it's seen as selling out. I know it's totally off the bat and going in a little sort of right turn, but if you relate it to like Nickelback back in the early 2000s, Nickelback were the perfect rock band. They had a massive following, and they were what they envisaged a rock band should be and how they should be, and the clothes and the stylized and stuff like that. And then after a few years of selling out tours, I mean, phenomenal, they started to become the sort of the direction of ridicule, because they were trying too hard. They wanted somebody who was natural. They wanted the realism of the real rock bands and that real person that you see, not the manufactured Nickelback, which I do love some of the Nickelback songs, so I don't have to say that. Any people who have other views, well, that's fine.
Fair enough. Speaking of different views, how about censorship and offense? So does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point, like a magician?
I think the comic, yeah, definitely courts it to get a reaction from it, to make people think. A comedian would maybe kind of try and avoid it because they don't want to go there, because it might, affect the way that they're perceived as a comedian.
So why would a comic not worry about that?
It's not that he doesn't worry about it, but the way that they go around it and work it into sort of performance will hopefully, but not always, have the desired effect for people to think about it in a different way.
Okay. So then who survives better in the cancel culture environment? The comic, the comedian, the magician, or the mudslinger? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast and get the message out today. See you soon.
I think the comedian, yeah, the natural comedian, I think, would survive. Yeah, that's all.
No one else will make it, huh?
No one else makes it. Just the comedian.
All right. So timing and delivery, is it a science or an art?
I think it's an art. It's not a science. You can't teach it, especially in acting and performance. You either have the natural ability of timing, of when to deliver a line, or you don't. You can work hard at it, and the theory is you can look at somebody and go, yeah, after this, and this is how long he pauses, and before he delivers this line, or he goes up on this phrase and down on that, and this makes it. But somebody who's naturally funny will have that comedic timing. I mean, I don't class myself as funny, but I've been on stage many a time, and I'm often portrayed as the comedic character. Now, I did the Lock-In film, which we filmed last year, which hopefully will be launched this year at some point on Amazon and also Apple TV. So that's a little bit of a punt there for the Lock-In, and that's a comedy kung fu movie about an assassin, and I'm the comedic person who gets locked in this pub, and I'm in the middle of it, and that character was actually written for me about what the guy who I met, Nathan Gearing, who's produced this, he saw of my sort of TikTok and my show reels and stuff like that. And he pulled things from what I'd done, and he was like, "This is the character." This year, and when I read the script, I was like, "That is just me. I don't have to, it's not pretending to be that character. Maybe it's enhanced a little bit, but yeah." So natural timing, I think you have it or you don't.
So that method the producer used, do you think that's an effective way to make movies?
I think it can be, because if you see something beforehand, and they have an idea as a producer, and they put different bits together. They put the lighting crew, the camera crew, and stuff like that, and then they pick an actor or an actress or a comedian, and they go, right, they'd be absolutely brilliant for this role. Then everything that you get on camera is more natural. Sometimes when I was filming it, I was told that it needed to be dumbed down a bit. So dulled down is where sometimes my facial expressions were a little bit too much, my facial eyebrows and stuff like that, because obviously it's close up. So I was always told a little bit less. But yeah, I think it's a good way of trying to create something.
All right. I agree with that 100%. So comedy is commentary. So when does a comedian cross into being a philosopher or a preacher?
Ooh. Wow. Could you give me an example of who you think maybe's crossed over?
I would say, well, I'm going to have to go with Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I think it's a difficult question, that, because I don't think they ever intend to become philosophers.
okay. Well, that's kind of the point. Like, is it what happened? Like, did they do it on purpose? Was this kind of an uncontrolled kind of next step in evolution?
I think when it happens, it's just the next step of an evolution. I mean, if you look at Hugh Laurie, who was the Doctor in the TV series House, he came from like Blackadder and stuff like that. And he's then moved through different genres and now has become, I mean, multi-talented. But some of the things he says, I think you kind of take him more seriously because of the journey that he's been on as a comedian, and then going through into playing the serious roles and sort of House as the Doctor in the TV series.
All right, I'll go with that. So, Drew, are you ready to enter the multiverse?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, board game Zoomcast, play versus performance. So, you have to choose an avatar. So, if comedy were a board game Zoomcast, are you competing as the colorist avatar, adding tone, mood, and shading, or the Foley artist avatar, building punchlines with soundscapes and timing?
I think the second one, building punchlines, building things. I'm kind of a very, as people who are in the industry of acting and the arts, you are naturally creative. And I like to be able to try and put people together, not necessarily that I'm going to be a part of whatever it is, but if I see somebody's got talent over here or, talent over there, I'll try and put it together. So I would see myself as a kind of a builder of the punchlines. not the sort of coolest.
All right. So then does comedy work better when it's painted vividly or when it's orchestrated sonically?
I think it works a lot better when it's painted vividly and it's there to be seen. I think the other way is understated. You know, comedy should be loud, not necessarily in your face, but it should be there to be seen and enjoyed really by everybody. And like I said earlier, I think sometimes I feel society has lost the ability to be able to laugh at themselves.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of comics have had to dial down what they're saying because they don't want to offend people.
All right. So here in the Comedians in Elevators podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest. And the previous guest was Craig Weiler. And his question for you, Drew, is what's the most important thing about a joke?
What's the most important thing about a joke? I think the most important thing, well, what's the reason for a joke? It's to make people laugh.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the whole reason of a joke being that it has to make people laugh. So I think that's the main thing, that it has to be laughable.
Okay. It has to be laughable. Got it. So basically it has to be a joke. So.
Yeah, basically it has to be a joke. But it has to be, you can't like define what a joke is. To somebody, a joke that's told might be funny to them as well, to somebody else, not so much. And I think that's the good thing about sort of, you know, the world, because everyone's different, everyone has different opinions and stuff like that. But I think you have to be more acceptable of what's being done in comedy as well, because sometimes comedy can want to really push the boundaries of where that line is.
Right. Okay, so last question. Legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics Tight Five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
I think the comedian's point of view will be more timeless. They'll be remembered for who they are and what they are. I think there was in one of your recent podcasts, a guy mentioned an English person, which was Tommy Cooper, who was a magician, and he started out doing the magic tricks, and obviously some of them went wrong. But he found that by the magic tricks going wrong, he got more of a laugh from that. So he built his own, his own sort of career out of making people laugh by doing magic tricks that didn't work, while adding his own sort of character to it. And he'll be remembered for years, Tommy Cooper. Also, if you remember him, he had a red hat on with a little black tassel, and he used to go just like that, just like that. Maybe you don't know over in America, but if you research Tommy Cooper, yeah, absolute legend.
All right. So, Drew, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me online. I do have a website, though I've been going for a couple of years. I don't know how long I'm going to keep that going for, because as an actor, I don't think it's a necessity to have that the way I'm moving forward. But you can find me on Instagram, Drew Sinclair 79, or on TikTok, Drew Sinclair. I've got many clips, comedic clips, things of me doing all sorts of silly stuff and acting.
All right. Awesome, Drew. Well, thank you so much for being my guest. And for everyone, please like and subscribe. And we will see you in the next one.
My pleasure.
If you're interested in too much information like in the network state or Mantipus the chicken shit, check out this video. Or is it this one right here? Well, either way. Lizard.